Before we proceed with the next session, may we call on Miss Reg from GIZ to introduce the next speaker.
Okay, good morning again. Okay, our next speaker, okay, even if he now plays a role as the Vice President of MERALCO and its Data Privacy Officer, he is well known in the data privacy industry as one of the renowned resource persons for data privacy and digital security. This is because he was one of the pioneering members of the National Privacy Commission upon its establishment, where he actually held two chief roles. One was a division chief of the Complaints and Investigations Division, and the other having served as the division chief of Data Security and the Technical Standards Division of the National Privacy Commission before he was pirated by the very rich conglomerate of the electricity industry and MERALCO. His credentials in data privacy and security are not just national but also international, having had certifications as information privacy manager and independent privacy professional, not just in the Philippines but also in Europe as well. As a lawyer, he's also a member of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, having also practiced at his own law office, and prior to his privacy engagement has been a graft and investigation prosecutor officer under the Office of the Deputy Ombudsman. And currently, other than his hat as the one of the officials of MERALCO, he also teaches part-time in the FEU, Public Policy Center. Ladies and gentlemen, also hindi ko masabing old friend kasi ibig sabihin matanda na tayong dalawa. One of my friends from long ago, Atty Francis Euston Acero.
Okay. Good morning pa. Today we'll be talking about specifically about evidence and some things that I took with me from my work as the Complaints and Investigations Division Chief of the National Privacy Commission. So there I had my own forensic lab, and part of our investigation mandate was to look at digital forensics and whatever we can get from the data processing systems that we were investigating. Okay. Nasabi na most of that. But just to say that I do have experience looking at digital evidence, and that's mainly why I got the job at the NPC in the first place. So, next. Okay, the idea is when we get this, I understand that we have problems with our evidence and case building. So the idea is you're supposed to think like a judge. So when you see that digital evidence before you, as an investigator, what you see before you is different from what the judge will see. So the training should always be, how do I bring this to court? How do I make sure that it's admissible? How do I make sure that it's bulletproof? Because whatever I get in evidence, the conclusions that I make because I can see it, I'm a rational human being, I understand it, how will the judge also appreciate the same thing? The role of the opposing counsel is not to invalidate you. It is to invalidate your evidence. Because without evidence, there's nothing. I understand other people talk about other forms of evidence, but today we will be talking specifically about digital evidence. Back to basics. All forms of evidence follow the two axioms of admissibility. First, none but the facts having rational probative value are admissible. So dapat may kinalaman siya to what you're trying to establish. As Coast Guard, you are law enforcement. That's not on land. So it requires you to have understanding of all the elements of the crimes you're going to have to enforce. Criminal law is simple. Satisfy 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, you go to jail. Hindi siya mahirap. Ang mahirap is you have to establish the 1, 2, 3, 4. How do you establish the 1, 2, 3, 4? Then you break that down into further evidence. You cannot say na obvious naman yan. Ito, kitang-kita ko. The worst evidence that you can get is testimonial evidence, even it's from you. Whatever you say, whatever you observe, has to be backed up by something. Okay? Basics. However, sino sa inyo mag-telepono? Mobile phone, cellphone. No, lahat kayo meron, di ba? In fact, the phone on you right now knows more about you than your wife, your best friend, your parents, and your children. Kung gusto nyo malaman kung may iba yung partner nyo sa buhay, tingnan nyo yung telepono nila. If that's the case for ordinary people like you and me, then the people that you're going to apprehend, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, the most important thing in their life is their phone. Nandun lahat ng ebidensya. For example, yun na nga, gusto yung maghanap. If you want to find out if your partner is cheating, look on the phone. Don't look about. Don't look at the other person. You'll never find the other person because the other person is long deleted. Kung sa Viber, naka-auto-delete yung messages nila, you'll never see them. Instead, you look about yourself and kung paano ka kinakwento sa mga kaibigan niya. In those, you will see kung paano ka, how she's describing you, and usually in the same conversation, not far from you, if there's someone else, you will see the someone else. So, how do you get that someone else finding that on the phone to court? Sige. Again, what is evidence? Evidence is the means of ascertaining the truth regarding a certain fact. How do you bring, again, ulit hindi pwede yung, ito na, obvious. Meron na, alam kong meron na kasi sinabi niya dito. How do you bring that to a place where it counts? Sa'yo, it doesn't count. The only place where that counts is before a judge. Therefore, your job is to document it. Dalawa yan. So una, factum probandum, which is the ultimate fact. So you often have to prove 1, 2, 3, 4. Yung isa factum probans. So yung 1, 2, 3, 4, you're proving it by evidence that establishes 1, 2, 3, 4. Simple so far. Parang ano to sa computer science, bibigyan ka ng ito paggawa ng 10 print hello, tapos hello, hello, hello. Tas dun pa lang, tas sasabihin next problem sa'yo is, gumawa ka ng video game. Same thing here. So it's very important to understand the basics. Una, dapat may kinalaman yung evidence mo. Pangalawa, dapat hindi pwede siyang ma-exclude ng kalaban. So 1, 2, 3, 4, how do you prove that? That's already in your text. Just review those basics. Ang dami nun. Pag diniscuss natin isa-isa yon for all the things that you enforce, mauubusan tayo ng oras. And now we go to the electronic evidence because as we said, everything that you need to prosecute your case is in the devices and in the computers of the people that you're apprehending. The idea is, in today's environment, wala nang kontra-kontrata eh. Pag nagkasundo yung tao, lalo na tayong Pilipino, or Asian society in general, versus a European society. European society, papel, dapat kontrata. Kung hindi nakakontrata, hindi nakapapel, does not exist. These guys, these Germans, sila champion nun. Pag wala sa papel, doesn't exist. Dapat nakapapel, di pwedeng understood. Problem is, our legal system doesn't really come from the way we Filipinos understand justice. It's a Western system, and therefore, everything is papel. But what does papel mean? Under this, yung mga chat, papel yun. So kung nagkasundo sila sa chat, ito mangyayari, papel yun. The other thing that you have to do is, so nakita mo yung chat. There are two ways to see the chat, di ba? Yung chat nakikita mo from the sender or the receiver. May kausap siya eh. How do you then prove na yung kausap niya, yung kausap niya? How do you prove na yung nakuha mong kausap niya, yung nasa loob ng phone, una, okay, let's bring it back to the example of the cheating spouse. Misis mo, kabit niya. How do you prove that yung chat na yon isa misis mo? Nakuha mo yung phone, and therefore, you have to authenticate na nakuha mo sa image sa phone. Nakuha mo yung chat sa phone. Digital forensics will tell you na it's not enough that you get a screenshot, you have to get that phone sent to a digital forensics lab, sila mag-extract ng chat. Hindi ikaw. Why is that better? Well, Coast Guard should invest in its own digital forensics lab. But until then, you might have to outsource. But why is that better? Ang bawa, screenshot mo. Ang bang gano'n kadali mag-fake ng screenshot? Set fonts yung nasa ano eh. Gumawa ka lang ng isa pang Viber account. Ba, nakita mo sa Viber. Gumawa ka ng isa pang Viber, gumawa ka ng iba pang number. Madaling dayain. But authentication inside electronic evidence. Two things. One, again, that you understand that this is who it purports to be. The other one is who the other person purports to be and how you're able to get that information. Kung ikaw, so authentication this way happens in several forms. No? So how do you know that it's that person? First, it really depends on the medium that you have. Sometimes, gamit yung PKI na gamit ng DICT. So that's the most secure way ng electronic signature. Medyo obvious yun kasi yung registry na sa DICT, pag ginamit, that's strong presumption na siya talaga gumamit nun. So, kumbawa, I'm sure lahat kayo meron ng ganon kasi in-encourage ng DICT na all personnel in government should have a PKI, electronic signature. So, again, pag yun lumabas, malamang siya. And that person have to prove a lot to say na it's not them. But when it comes to something like Viber or Facebook Messenger, naturally, the method is different because the authentication here is digitally signed. Right? The digital signature just means that inside Viber, no, may acknowledgement inside the Viber system that it came from a particular account. The accounts are divided by mobile number. So, you either get subpoena to get the mobile number from the telephone carrier, or you get subpoena to get the account straight from Viber. That this is the number, this is the account that's used to send this, that this account is registered to this, that this account is using this IP at this time. So it's easy to trace back. Same thing with the phone that you have. Dalawang ano, no? There's an electronic signature, there's a digital signature. Yung PKI, naggawa ng DICT, digital signature yon. Yung electronic signature, yung nakascan, tapos nakakapatong, yung ginagamit ng Adobe. Yung sa Adobe, libre yun sa fill and sign. Those are for the documents that you can find inside whatever you're apprehending. But, and I say this on there because we're a very verbal culture. What's important sa atin is may isa tayong salita. And then the rest is measured by the actions. In fact, our time is not measured by time, it's measured by actions. Pagkatapos kong kumain, pagkatapos ng meeting. Ano oras matatapos yung meeting? Di ko alam, basta pagkatapos ng meeting. When you look at the evidence that you are then able to collect, say after cybercrime warrant, nakuha mo, how reliable is the system that you're getting it from? Meaning, normally naman kasi, when you get that kind of data, you're not just going to look at chat logs. The real language of business, pag naka-ano yan, naka-Excel yan, pag malaki-laki na. At some point, somewhere, inside whatever computing device they have, naka-spreadsheet yun. Kung naka-spreadsheet siya, what is the reliability in which it's generated, stored, and communicated? Yung mga cellphone ngayon, they say these terms like 128 gig memory, 64, wala na 64. Mahirap na yung 64. 128 to 56. But these numbers are abstract. Parang nako-compare lang natin siya in terms of ito gig. Basta ito 128 yung kalaban na phone 256. Doon na tayo sa 256. But really, we don't really have an idea of what that means in terms of the files that's there. Sino dito yung naka-Samsung? Kayo, sir? Samsung phone nyo? Yung Samsung phone, may built-in AI na yan noon pa. Yung tawag ngayon is generative AI. So sa generative AI, pwede kang kumuha ng picture ng group picture. Tapos may ayaw ka doon, pwede mo siyang tanggalin. Tapos hindi siya magmumukhang obvious. Where does this become important? Because aside from chats, the other place where you'll find the information that you need are in the photos. And the photos ngayon are searchable and all that. But is the photo that you're getting the photo that really matters because, or is it something that they can disprove na doktor siya? And because nga, madali nga mag-doktor ng photos ngayon with Samsung, dadating na Apple AI, you have to be able to establish, as you extract this information, that this is the unaltered, unedited photo, that this information is what it says it is. Again, saan siya nagagamit pag yung mga, for example, kabataan nagse-selfie, tapos some tourist place, maraming tao. Gusto nilang pakita sila lang. Kaya nang i-edit yun pagabas isa-isa. What if the people behind the person, that's the important data that you want in the photo itself? So it's not enough that you present it. You have to also to be able to establish that the evidence that you're getting is pretty accurate. You also have to be able to establish how the data was generated and how you're able to establish that the person generating that data, kumuha ng photo, nagsulat ng entry, nagsulat ng chat, is that person. Again, we already talked about for chat messaging. No? And usually, for establishing the origination of those photos, if you look at your phone, ba yan, iPad, tingnan niyo yung app, Photos app niyo, you can sort that by face, because there's face recognition. You can also sort that by location. And if you're using Google Photos, maraming nag-upload, you can sort it by device. How does your computer know that? Your pocket computer know that? Kasi each photo that you take has what's called metadata. Kahit yung photo na gagabas dyan sa digital camera, yung soft copy niyan may metadata yan. If you're lucky, that metadata also has GPS coordinates in it, which is just as important, which also establishes how you establish the originator of the photo. I had a friend, and she's really pretty. And as a person who's really pretty, sanay siya that she gets her way. Also, including sa mga lalaki. So, in short, cheater siya. Di ko sinasabing pag maganda misis nyo, automatic cheater na yon. But, yung mister niya was in a uniformed service. And although nasa signal siya, he wasn't that bright. But bright enough to require na, sige magpa-picture ka kung nasaan ka. She thought she was smarter than him, and she proved that she was. Tinatanggal niya yung metadata sa loob. It's called EXIF data. You can do the same on your phones. You can download an app that takes out all the EXIF data from the photos you take. But know that the absence of that evidence is in itself evidence. But walang EXIF data yung picture mo. You can't fake it. You can only take it out. And if you modify that data, you're looking at it as numbers, coordinates. The coordinates won't match up. Familiarity of the person who entered into that system. Normally, these rules are for people who enter into a large database. Sa bangko, mga teller. Useful din pag teller pagdating sa anti-money laundering aspect of whatever you're trying to establish. But usually, mga ganyan, because there's a proprietary system, papasok ng data, how familiar are you? Ang tanong doon, ilang taon ka na nag-enter ng data? But in a world of mobile phones and tablets, the nature of how you establish the familiarity will be different. Gaano katagal na sa kanya yung device? Gaano katagal na niyang ginagamit? How do you establish that? With your photos app. Ang Apple ngayon, they save a small thumbnail of whatever you have onto their cloud. They'll ask you to save onto the cloud. You can look into that data as part of the forensic investigation. The world of data is three things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What will really affect the presentation of your electronic evidence really is the integrity of the data. Meaning two things. On one side, it means that whatever's reflected in the data is what it says it is. The other thing that's there about the integrity of the data is that the data that you seized at the point of seizure following a cybercrime warrant is the same data that you're going to present to the court. So therefore, when you are going to present digital evidence wherever you're going to prosecute, dalawa yung papakita mo. First is the person who did the arrest, search, and seizure of the physical device. Remember that the arrest, search, and seizure that includes the capture of the physical device is not the same permission to examine the contents. The examination of the contents should be left to the digital forensic specialist. That way you preserve the integrity. Why is that important? It means if you see computers that are plugged in, you unplug them, you never plug them back. Kahit para makita mo lang yung hawak nila. If you see them with a cell phone, you take the cell phone, let the battery die out naturally. You do not touch the cell phone, you do not ask them to open it. Pansin niyo, wala nang tumatanggap ng cash ngayon masyado. Or di na kailangan mag-cash masyado, nag-Gcash na lang. But, kahit may Gcash, kahit may resibo ang dumadating sa'yo, may transaction history, anong ginagawa ng tao ngayon? Sir, pwede pa picture ng phone nyo. Right? So, pinipicture or nagpapa-screenshot tapos pinapadala sa Viber or WhatsApp nila or Messenger. So, sir, process lang ho namin yan. What does that mean? It means that if they're habitually doing this, those are their business records. And the photos that they get as part of their business records are, number one, presumed to be true, presumed to be originals, and admissible as their business records. So it's not just the GCash account itself where you can track. If they're keeping screenshots, as people do these days, those screenshots are part of the evidence you can get. And it becomes even more important now when you catch the device where those images are stored. You don't do anything to that device, even if the suspect asks for it. I had a case once. I had a client. We went to the NBI. The client used to sell cars, and he would take down payments for really nice cars. The people that he knew in those circles were either ahente ng sasakyan, and those people earn a lot of money, or car enthusiasts. So the guy was apprehended by the NBI after a buy-bust operation. And several items were found on him, including the IDs of the people that he scammed, including those of my client. At that time, the NBI's digital forensics team was not in place yet. This was sometime in 2014, 2015. Not 2015. So ginawa ng NBI agent, instead of preserving the phones, nung sinabi ng suspect, kasi di pa madala sa detention facility, nandun muna sa loob ng pinakiusapan ng lawyer. Pwedeng humingi ng cellphone, tatawagin ko lang yung nanay ko. Inabot sa suspect yung phone niya. And from that point, nag-delete na siya ng nag-delete. To the point na, nung binalik na yung phone, pinakita sa akin, "Sir, tingnan mo to. Binura niya lahat." Tapos tinanong ko, "Paano niya nabura?" "Inabot ko sa kanya, sir." Don't make those mistakes. Or how will they challenge the screenshots that they make? They'll say the screenshots were doctored, whatever. Which is why, again, it's important to be able to document that when you seize the digital items without examining them in the first place, because the temptation is, di ba, tingnan, kunin, tingnan. Don't do that. Just get it. Itemize it in inventory so you can prepare the cybercrime warrant. The moment that there's a doubt as to the ability of someone to put anything in there, then there is that gap. At the end of the day, you'll need to create protocols for that, because you'll be presenting both the person who made the seizure, the physical seizure, and then the digital examination. When you take audio, photo, and video, and this is generally, this does not include body-worn cameras. That's a different rule. But if you're taking audio, photo, and video, that can be part of evidence. But you have to be able to present the person who made the recording. You have to demonstrate that the manner of the recording is factual, meaning di siya ng doktor. And then, how it was stored and then retrieved for use in the proceedings. These all have to be documented. It's tedious. Sometimes when I ask the other law enforcement how they do it, so everyone has a camera phone now, right? So they'll just record it. Sometimes they'll edit it pa. Don't do that. There won't be any documentation for that. Whatever you do, however you collect your evidence, you have to be able to document how you collected it, where you collected it, sino last touch, and how that evidence gets transferred from one person to another. So as you present it in court, from the time that it gets collected, up until the time that it gets presented in court, anyone who's touched that along the way has to be presented. What's the difference between a public document and a private document? If it's in case of body-worn cameras, if there's an assault on a person in authority or someone dies inside the operation, then it becomes a public document. But what does a public document really mean? It just means that it already is it's presumed that whatever's there is there. That it's true, that it is an accurate representation of what's inside. Because the definition now of a document also includes video. A private document is everything else. So you have to present the people who are there, how it was recorded, how it was made. As I said, when you seize a digital device after an arrest, magamang kasi moving vehicle, you might not need it. You will still need a warrant for the contents of the device. The physical device is different from the contents. The rule on exigent circumstances will never apply for the contents of a digital device. Bakit? Because the courts understand na nasa iyo na yan eh. And since it's with you, no one else has access to it. Therefore, you have time to prepare. Also, to get the contents of a digital device is not simple. So if it's, for example, a phone will get copied from its memory either by taking off the chip in case of a severely damaged phone or by using a device to extract the contents of the phone. And the contents of the phone won't be extracted by files, but by how it's stored as a 1 and a 0 inside the phone's memory, however big that is. So if it's a 128 gig phone, then the extraction will be 128 gigabytes. 1 and 0. And then software will be used to reconstruct. Again, it becomes important at that point to be able to document what is being stored on the phone. What I find lacking in cybercrime warrants are what if the data stored in a cloud account? How do you subpoena the information in that cloud? It's not here. I would assume that that would be a subpoena duces tecum on the part of the cloud provider for them to provide that data. But that, for a digital forensic examination of that data, that's not established yet. What's established is the device, if the data is on the device, or on servers or computers owned by the people that you're investigating. It can be difficult to understand where the venue is going to be, saan ka kukuha ng warrant. So the rule on cybercrime warrant says that you can get in Manila, Makati, Pasig, Quezon City, Cebu, Iloilo, Davao, and Cagayan de Oro. In those RTCs nationwide in jurisdiction of cybercrime warrant. If you're prosecuting something that's under cybercrime but conducted through the use of ICT, then you go through the regular court. These are just for cybercrime offenses. Cybercrime ang pala yan, ba't kailangan pa namin kung offshore? There's a lot you can do with data. You store it offshore. So if you have a cybercrime warrant, generally, you're looking at traffic data from whatever telco they're using. And you have to, the telcos are required to keep it for 6 months, but the truth is, the telco will not be able to tell you where the data comes from if you're off in your request by more than 24 hours. So, if you have someone in custody and you want to know their traffic data using their cell phone that they use offshore, takukuha naman ng signal ng pero dinadaan sa 5G, you have to let them know within 24 hours or before the day ends. Because every day, what they call the network allocation table, that's going to change. The network allocation table is what tells the telco that this device is the one that's sending you the data. The reason why we're doing that is because we're in IP version 4, Internet Protocol. Version 6 takes away that ambiguity because version 6, IP version 6 is device specific. We're not there yet. So even though there's traffic data for 6 months, you have to let them know. Okay. I guess this would be for data that's in the cloud. Warrant to disclose computer data. But how do you get that if the cloud service provider is, say, Microsoft? I don't know. It's never been tried. But I would assume if that is served on Microsoft Philippines or Google Philippines, their internal legal will allow access to that and then allow for the forensic investigation. Sometimes, if you're already on the network, you have access to their network. You just want to get their computer data in wiretapping. That's done through a warrant to intercept computer data. So, as part of our training inside the National Privacy Commission, I got certification as a network forensics examiner. So one of the tests is to sit in a coffee shop, set up a Wi-Fi, titingin kung sino kakagat, and then look at the data of the people using the Wi-Fi. Once upon a time, it was easy to get that information because people did not encrypt their data in transmission. But for that reason, when you submit or when you transmit personal information to one another, you're supposed to encrypt your files and then send the password on another email. If you know where the device is, but you don't have it in your possession, you get this. Warrant to search, seize, and examine computer data. If you have the device in your possession because you seized the device following an arrest, then it's warrant to examine computer data. In both cases, you will need to maintain meticulous chain of custody. Dapat meron kayong internal forms nun. The internal forms will serve as authenticated documents. Public documents, sorry. They'll serve as public documents because they're made in the course of your office. Whatever happens to your warrant to search, seize, and examine, or your warrant to examine computer data, there is going to be a return that's going to be filed with either the inquest prosecutor or the court, as the case may be. See, sometimes preliminary investigation pa lang eh. So that's going to be kept in the custody of the court or the inquest prosecutor. Okay. Wait, lastly. May affidavit yan, You have to make an affidavit regarding the seizure. Basically, everyone who has come into contact with it under chain of custody. Okay, so that's it for today's lecture. Sana may natutunan kayo. Thank you.